developments in the desperate search for Nancy Guthrie are coming to light as officials issue a description of her possible abductor. We're also learning for the first time about crucial evidence found inside of Nancy Guthrie's home. Let's take a look at all the major pieces of evidence and clues so far. So the newly discovered image and video from the doorbell camera, that's going to be critical for that criminal profile. We'll get to that later. Nancy's front door camera was disconnected. That helps us with the timeline. The blood found on the porch was Nancy Guthrie's. That's also the patterns there. We'll get to that later. Can tell us what condition Nancy left in. The pacemaker lost connection with the phone. This gives us, again, a timeline of everything that's happening. The alleged ransom letter sent to news outlets haven't been confirmed if this is the abductor yet. They also found, this is new.
Minutes ago, Savannah Guthrie revealed her mom shed her own blood to make it look like a kidnapping. Give me prompt to do the story like 20 mins and add CTA. The room was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence, the kind of silence that feels wrong, heavy, suffocating. And then her voice broke it. Calm, controlled, but hiding something deeper. Just minutes ago, Savannah Guthrie revealed something that left people frozen in disbelief. She said her mother had shed her own blood. Not because someone attacked her, but to make it look like someone did. To make it look like a kidnapping. And suddenly, everything people thought they knew started to fall apart. Because nothing is more terrifying than realizing the danger might have come from inside. Savannah had spent most of her life in front of cameras, confident, composed, in control. Millions of people trusted her voice, trusted her calm presence. She represented truth, stability, certainty. But behind that calm exterior, there was always a story she never fully told. A story that began long before the cameras, long before the fame, long before anyone was watching. It began in a quiet home, a normal home, or at least it appeared normal. Her childhood wasn't filled with obvious chaos. There were no broken windows, no police cars outside every night, no screaming loud enough for neighbors to hear. Instead, there was something far more difficult to explain. Silence. Long pauses at the dinner table. Strange tension that couldn't be named. Moments where her mother would stare into nothing, as if fighting thoughts no one else could see. And as a child, Savannah noticed. Children always notice. They notice what adults try to hide. They notice when smiles aren't real. They notice when something feels wrong. But they don't always understand why. If you enjoy true crime documentaries like this, subscribe now, because the next story might be even more disturbing. At first, there was no single moment that shattered everything. No loud crash, no sudden disappearance. Just small things. Her mother becoming distant, distracted, sometimes afraid, sometimes strangely calm. Too calm. There were nights she wouldn't sleep, nights she would walk through the house slowly, quietly, as if listening for something. Or someone. Savannah would pretend to sleep, but she was always watching. Always wondering. Always feeling that something was coming. And then one day it did. It was an ordinary morning. The kind of morning no one remembers, until it becomes the last normal moment they ever experience. The sun was up, the air was still, nothing felt unusual. Until Savannah realized her mother wasn't there. At first it didn't seem serious. People leave the house all the time, they go for walks, they run errands, they clear their minds. But then something disturbing happened. The back door was open. Not slightly open. Wide open. And on the floor there was blood. Not a drop. Not a smear. But enough to stop your heart. Enough to make you feel cold. Enough to make you know something was terribly wrong. Savannah froze. Her mind tried to reject what her eyes were seeing. Because blood doesn't belong on the floor of your home. Blood means injury. Blood means violence. Blood means someone was hurt. Or worse, her hands started shaking. Her breathing became uneven. She called out. No answer. Again. Nothing. Just silence. That same silence she had felt her entire life, but now it meant something different. Now it meant absence. Now it meant fear. And in that moment, everything changed. Before we continue, comment your location below. I want to see where everyone watching this story is from. Because stories like this don't just happen in one place. They can happen anywhere. Even somewhere that feels safe. Even somewhere that feels normal. Even somewhere like home. Savannah called for help. Her voice breaking, her mind racing faster than she could control. Every second felt longer than the last. Every second without answers made the fear worse. Because the human mind always goes to the darkest possibility first. Kidnapping. Attack. Abduction. The words formed before anyone even said them out loud. And once those words exist, they never leave. Police arrived quickly. Questions came immediately. Where was she last seen? Was anyone else in the house? Did she have enemies? Did she have problems? Savannah tried to answer, but her thoughts were fragmented, scattered, because nothing could have prepared her for this. The officers moved carefully. They examined the door, the floor, the blood. Every detail mattered, because every detail told a story. And this story was just beginning. At first glance, it looked exactly like what everyone feared. A struggle, a forced removal, a violent disappearance. The kind investigators see when someone is taken against their will. And for Savannah, that belief became her reality. Her mother was gone, taken, stolen, and the only thing left behind was blood. But then something disturbing happened. Something no one expected. Something that would later change everything. Investigators noticed something strange. There were no signs of forced entry. No broken locks. No shattered windows. No overturned furniture. Nothing that suggested a violent fight. Just the blood. And the open door. It didn't make sense. Because real kidnappings are chaotic. Messy. Loud. But this was quiet. Too quiet. And that silence raised questions no one was ready to answer. What investigators found next shocked everyone. But Savannah didn't know that yet. At that moment, she was still just a daughter. A daughter waiting, hoping, praying that her mother would come back. Alive, unharmed, safe. But deep down, there was a feeling she couldn't explain. A feeling that this wasn't what it seemed. A feeling that the truth was far more disturbing. And she was right. The first night was the hardest, because night brings questions that daylight hides. Savannah sat in the same chair for hours, staring at the door, waiting, listening, hoping she would hear footsteps, hoping she would hear her mother's voice, hoping she would hear anything. But nothing came. Only silence. And silence can be louder than screams. Investigators remained inside the house long after the sun disappeared. Their flashlights moved slowly across the walls, across the floor, across every inch of the place that once felt safe. They weren't just looking. They were reconstructing. Every drop of blood told a story. Every object told a story. Every absence told a story. And sometimes what isn't there is more important than what is. Savannah watched them carefully. She studied their faces, their reactions, their body language. She was searching for hope, but she wasn't finding it. Because the investigators weren't acting like men chasing kidnappers. They were acting like men solving a puzzle. And puzzles mean uncertainty. Puzzles mean doubt. Puzzles mean something doesn't fit. One of the investigators stopped near the kitchen entrance. He stared at the floor for a long moment, longer than expected. He didn't speak. He just stared. Then he called another investigator over. They whispered, quietly, too quietly for Savannah to hear. But she could see it in their eyes. Something was wrong. Very wrong. But then something disturbing happened. They started taking photographs of things that didn't look important. Not just the blood. Not just the door. But small things. Precise things. Measured things. The kind of things you photograph when you're not just confirming a crime, but questioning it. Savannah's heart began to pound harder. Because deep down, her instincts were screaming something she didn't want to accept. This wasn't unfolding the way it should. Real kidnappings create chaos, noise, destruction. But this felt controlled, calculated, almost deliberate. And that's when one investigator asked a question that changed everything. Was your mother afraid of someone? Savannah hesitated. Her mind raced through memories, moments, conversations, strained behavior, late nights, quiet tension. But there was never a clear enemy, never a clear threat. Just fear. Fear without a face. Fear without a name. And that kind of fear is the hardest to understand. Because it doesn't come from outside. It comes from within. Before we go further, comment your location below. I want to know where you're watching from right now. Because the truth behind this story didn't just shock one place. It shocked everyone who heard it. The next morning, investigators returned. Not with urgency, but with focus. They weren't rushing. They were analyzing, which meant they had already begun forming theories. Savannah could feel it. Something had shifted. Their tone was different. Their questions were different. And their eyes held something she couldn't yet understand. Doubt. They asked her to walk them through everything again. Every moment. Every detail. Every memory. Not just from that morning, but from the days before. And as she spoke, she began remembering things she hadn't noticed before. Things that once seemed small, but now felt enormous. Her mother had been acting differently, quieter than usual, watching Savannah more closely, as if she was trying to memorize her, as if she knew something was coming, as if she was preparing for goodbye. Savannah's voice trembled as she spoke, because saying it out loud made it real, made it heavier, made it harder to escape. But then something disturbing happened. The investigators revealed something they hadn't mentioned before. The blood. It wasn't scattered randomly. It was concentrated, controlled, placed, not consistent with a violent struggle, consistent with something else, something intentional. Savannah felt her stomach drop. Her mind immediately rejected the implication. Because there are some truths the brain refuses to accept. Some truths that feel impossible. Some truths that feel like betrayal. And this was one of them. What investigators found next shocked everyone. There were no defensive wounds in the area. No signs of resistance. No evidence of someone being dragged. No overturned objects. No broken structure. Nothing that suggested force. Which raised a terrifying question. What if no one took her? What if she left? If you're still watching, comment truth below. I want to know what you think really happened. Because at this point, everything people believed began to collapse. Savannah couldn't breathe properly. Her chest felt tight. Her thoughts spiraled. Because if no one took her, then why was there blood? Why leave blood behind? Why create that image? Why create that fear? Unless it was meant to be seen. Unless it was meant to convince. Unless it was meant to tell a story. A false story. The investigators asked one final question that day. Did your mother ever hurt herself? Savannah froze. Not because she knew the answer, but because she didn't want to. Because answering meant facing something darker. Something painful. Something she had avoided her entire life. Her mind replayed memories. Moments of isolation. Moments of emotional distance. Moments of quiet suffering. Things she never understood as a child. But now, they began to make sense. Slowly, painfully, and nothing could have prepared her for this realization. Because sometimes the person you're trying to protect is the one hiding the truth. Hours later, investigators received lab confirmation. The blood belonged to her mother. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was how it was shed. The cuts were precise, controlled, deliberate, not defensive, not chaotic, intentional. Savannah stared at the report in disbelief, her hands trembling, her vision blurring, because this meant something unthinkable, something unbearable, something that shattered everything she believed. Her mother hadn't just disappeared. She had created the illusion of being taken. She had created the illusion of violence. She had created the illusion of being a victim. But why? That question became the center of everything. Why would someone hurt themselves? To make it look like they were kidnapped. Why create fear? Why create trauma? Why leave behind a daughter to suffer? The answer wasn't simple. The answer was buried beneath years of silence. Years of hidden pain. Years of emotional struggle no one fully saw. And as Savannah sat alone that night, staring into the darkness, she realized something that terrified her more than the disappearance itself. Her mother hadn't just vanished. She had chosen to vanish. And choice changes everything. Choice removes innocence. Choice removes randomness. Choice introduces intention. And intention introduces truth. But the truth was still incomplete. Because one question remained unanswered. Where was she now? Alive? Hiding? Watching? Or gone forever? Savannah couldn't escape the possibility that somewhere her mother was still out there. Breathing. Thinking. Knowing exactly what she had done. Knowing exactly what she had left behind. And that thought was more disturbing than anything else. Because the scariest part wasn't the blood. It wasn't the disappearance. It wasn't even the deception. It was the realization that the person she trusted most had been living a reality Savannah never truly saw. And the deeper investigators looked, the darker that reality became.